About the book, Stronger. George, could you hold up a copy of that thing while you're over there? I knew there was a reason why I brought you here.
So you got to admit, it's a full cover. And there's a really good picture inside. The first one,
He's starting to hallucinate. After lunch, he starts to hallucinate. You have to excuse him. Yeah, who's going to introduce me? I'm one of the co-authors. We're really, really excited about the book, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about that in detail. But before we get started, I want to ask you a question. What do you think is the most valuable gift you can give your kids? Who has a thought about that?
Yourself.
Yourself? That helps. Good point, Pat. Your values. Anybody else? A copy of the book, right?
Love of learning.
Excellent. All good. You know, I asked my son that question. I said, Kev, what do you think the most valuable gift I could give you? And he didn't hesitate. He said, real estate. But you got to forgive him. He's a doctor down at Hopkins now. He just graduated and he's starting his training. I said, no, son, it's not money. It's not real estate. It's really teaching them to cope with a world that doesn't love them as much as I love my kids or as much as you love your kids. Because I can tell you, and George will, I'm sure, back me up, with 100% assurity that your kids and my kids will face difficulties in their life. And there's going to be a great deal of difficulties. And the most valuable gift you can give them is the gift of resilience. And really the great thing about resilience, it can be taught. It's good for your children. It's good for you. It's good for your company. It's good for your employees. And it's good for your entire organization. And also about resilience and the concept of it, its ability to be able to bounce back from adversity, because we all face adversity in our lives. And we think it's probably the biggest and the best predictor of success, whether it's in business, whether it's in athletics, or whether it's in life. The bottom line, when you get knocked down, you get backed up. You get knocked down again, you get back up. You get knocked down 10 or 15 times. Jack, what do? You get back up. And it's never, ever too late to learn about resilience. And our book, Stronger, Develop the Resilience You Need to Succeed, as a subtitle. We're going to brag on that book a little bit. We really think it's a great book. We're very proud of it. We've really been getting some tremendous press. Our publisher, the American Management Association, has really done a fantastic job. We were quite fortunate. Our agent created like an auction. There were 3 publishers that wanted to publish the book. So he created a little bit of auction with the book, and we got a very good advance. It's recently been named one of the top 30 best business books of the year. And the key thing with any publication, the key thing with any publisher, is you can have the greatest book in the world, you can have the greatest anything in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it's not going to sell. So that was really the key thing with us, to get somebody that was going to be behind it and be able to promote it. And George and I have been on radio stations across the country since it came out in August. And we've had reviews by Forbes, by CNN, by a ton of other blogs. I mean, it's really been exciting, the type of feedback we're getting on this book. But we really came at the book from different perspectives. George, the senior author of the book, is a clinical psychologist. He's a professor, he's a researcher, and he's done a lot of work in the field of resilience for many, many years. My training is as an organizational psychologist, and I've done consulting work for a long time with small companies and large companies and companies across the country. The third co-author is a counseling psychologist, and one of the really unique things about him, he's one of the original Navy SEALs from the 1960s. And he's really has some unbelievable stories, I tell you. I mean, they're really unbelievable. We have several of those type of stories in the book. And I guess with the Navy SEALs, they're trained. They're trained to face danger. They're trained in terms of crisis, that they head it straight on. And when they face danger and they're in a crisis situation, they expect to succeed each and every time. We also interviewed some fascinating people, and they told us their stories about resilience and how they responded to adversity. We interviewed professional athletes, terror survivors, one of those people was Erica Braddock, the young lady here in Baltimore that lost her leg in the Boston Marathon at the finish line a couple years ago, April 2013. We interviewed politicians and we interviewed some presidential candidates. We also talked to people like Cal Ripken Jr., the Iron Man, Olympic champion from 1980, Jim Craig. Who remembers that story when the USA, won the Olympic gold medal? Who remembers the line from Al Michaels? What was the famous line from Al Michaels from the 1980 Olympics? You're a sports fan, Marty. What was his famous line? Anybody? Marty doesn't know. You, there you go. Do you believe in miracles? And we interviewed Jim Craig, and he could close his eyes, and he could tell us all about those 1980 Olympics, which is 35 years ago. Fascinating, fascinating person. We also interviewed presidential candidate Dr. Ben Carson before he, became a presidential candidate. What an unbelievable interview. I don't know whether you know a lot about him, but just an unbelievable story. His mother was one of 24 children. Talked about being raised up in poverty and how he made the transition from almost being a juvenile delinquent and being in jail to becoming one of the premier neurosurgeons in the country, and now a presidential candidate and the leading presidential candidate. And from our research, we concluded that successful people, they share a set of 5 core factors that equip them with the concept of personal resilience. Now, we believe that these 5 core factors enable people, enable organizations, and even communities to withstand and rebound from adversity. Communities is unbelievable. There's a story there about a small community in Pennsylvania, how as a group of people, how they were able to withstand all types of problems with adversity. I mean, it's a great, great story. Now, we're not going to share all the 5 factors with you. Quite frankly, we want you to buy the book. And we're selling it to you at a discount. And we're even autograph it for you as well. But we're going to talk about a couple of the factors. Another question I want to ask everybody. How many people in the room consider themselves a pessimist? See a show of hands. Don't be afraid. If you're a pessimist, raise your damn hand. How many people consider themselves an optimist? Yeah, that's what I would have expected. We talk about 2 types of optimists in the book, a passive optimist and an active optimist. Now, passive optimists, they hope things will turn out well, and they believe, in fact, that things will turn out well. But those who merely hope and believe, they're really surrendering control. They're surrendering control of their circumstances to someone and something else. We're active optimists. They act in a way that increases the likelihood that things will, in fact, turn out well. Many of the Navy SEALs that we interviewed and we talked to and have known describe this type of optimism as a mandate to create a positive future. They all, I tell you that right now, I mean, it's so hard to become a Navy SEAL. I mean, they're literally the top of the top. They have this positive mental attitude, and they have the expectation of personal success. And you got to remember, failure to a Navy SEAL is often the difference between life and death. And we have some of those stories in the book, and we talk about that. Some of the Navy SEALs that, in fact, did die when they were on a mission. But overall, all active optimists do believe that they can make a difference. They choose to take control over their circumstances, and they choose to take control over their lives. They move towards the sound of distress and despair because they expect and they know they can make a difference. Colin Powell had a great, great quote, the former Secretary of State, and I'll read that to you. Perpetual optimism, believing in yourself, believing in your purpose, believing you will prevail, and demonstrating passion and confidence is a force multiplier. So important, not only to be an optimist, but to have the concept of active optimism. Now let's talk a little bit about resilience and failure. I'll ask you another question. How many people in this room have failed at something in their life? Every hand should be up in this room, I can tell you that, because my hand is up as well. We're going to talk about resilience and the gift of failure. And it may be odd to talk about the concept of failure as a gift, but highly successful and resilient people know that's a fact and it's true. People like Al Newhart, the founder of USA Today, Cal Ripken Jr., one of the greatest baseball players of all time, Michael Jordan, voted the greatest athlete of the 20th century by ESPN, and even Thomas Edison. Unfortunately, we were unable to interview him because he was no longer around, but the greatest inventor of the 20th century. They all agree that failure was a necessary aspect of their subsequent success. Al Newhart, told you before, the founder of USA Today. Anybody ever read his book? It was a book entitled Diary of an SOB. He thought of himself as an SOB. Anybody read that book? He had a great line in that book. If you haven't failed at something and you're past the age of 35, you better hurry up and fail or you won't be a success. Because he felt you couldn't appreciate success until you've known the depths of failure. And it's so, so true. You know, his first newspaper that he started in the 50s went bankrupt. And USA Today lost millions and millions of dollars when it first came to the market, before it revolutionized print journalism. He wrote in his book, and I'll quote as well, "Failure should not stop your drive to succeed. Rather, it's how you respond to failure that makes all the difference." You get knocked down, what do, Jack? You get back up. The same concept again. For Cal Ripken, really was a great, great interview with Cal. He feels success is celebrated because, according to Cal, we find out who we are in failure. How many baseball fans do we have in here? I'm not going to ask about football, but how many baseball fans do we have in here? I'm going to test you a little bit. How many All-Star games did Cal participated in his baseball career? I didn't know this myself. Come on, we're the baseball fans. How many All-Star games? Anybody got a guess? 19. Way to go. I didn't realize that. How many consecutive games did he play in to break Lou Gehrig's record? 21-31. And how many games did he play beyond breaking that record that have the all-time record today that he has?
23 or something?
26-32, which almost is 17 straight years of playing in each and every game. And now they talk about Manny Machado. He was the only professional baseball player of all the baseball players to play in each and every game. You talk about records that won't be broken. I tell you, I don't think that record will ever, ever be broken. Now, failure to Cal, I mean, I talked about it. He's finding out who you are in failure. And I think George will agree that was probably one of our most favorite interviews, because Cal is really he's a laid-back guy, but he's very, very dynamic. And he talked about when his father was fired. Cal Ripken Sr. was the manager in 1987, and after 6 consecutive losses in 1988, he was fired, I believe, by Edward Bennett Williams. And in being interviewed, Edward Bennett Williams said he wanted somebody a little bit more dynamic, somebody with a bigger name than Cal Ripken Sr. Cal actually heard about his father's being fired. He was driving to the ballpark. And like I said before, Cal is a very, very reserved person. His brother, Billy, was also playing on that team as well. Anybody that knows Billy, he's a freight train. I guess the only way to describe him. He's a great guy, but he's very, very emotional. This was the first time and the only time in Major League history that a father was the manager of 2 sons playing on the same team. So Cal was telling us he was driving to the ballpark. He heard it on the radio, and his first thought was, I got to get to the ballpark before Billy does. Didn't he tell us that, George? And we said, Cal, why? He said he didn't know what Billy was going to do in the locker room. Because Billy is, I'm telling you, he's the total opposite of Cal. And Cal said he was able to get to the locker room before Billy, was able to talk to him, and was able to calm him down. And Cal was distraught at the same time, too. But he knew he had to handle it in a professional way. He also said that if it would have been later in the season, he probably would not have remained an Oriole, because it was just too much for him to take. It took him months and months to get over it. And as we all know, Cal was an all-time Oriole, played 23 years, and one of the few people to play for the same team. I think he's really a remarkable person, and when you talk to him, you're really struck by his humility, his sincerity, and his compassion. And we really enjoyed that interview. Michael Jordan also reflects on failure and how it leads to success. He talks about it, he had an unbelievable career. He said, I've missed close to 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost close to 300 games, and 26 times I was asked to take the winning shot in a game, and I was not successful. He said he's failed over and over again in his life, and quite frankly, that's why I succeed. I mean, what a story. He was cut from his high school basketball team. He went to the University of North Carolina, and they were national champions. He turned pro, and just what an unbelievable career. 1991, 92, 93, he was an NBA champion. And then his father was killed in just a freak accident. His father was parked on the side of a road in one of those rest stops. He was driving down south, and just a freak accident, two young, I guess like thugs, shot him, robbed him and shot him. And Michael was just devastated. He talks about how it really fought hard to overcome that. And one of the things he talked about, he said his father always told him he thought he was going to be a professional baseball player. And the last time Michael played baseball was back in high school. But Michael remembered that. And he retired from basketball, and he tried to become a professional baseball player. How many people remember that? I mean, what an unbelievable... This guy's at the top of the world as a basketball player. He retires to try to fulfill his father's dream to be a professional baseball player. He played a couple years, and I got to tell you, if you ever faced a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, which I did in college, I can only imagine what it is at the professional level. He barely hit 200. He played a couple years, and he finally retired from baseball. Then he went back to the NBA in 1996, 97, and 98. He did another three-peat. They were national champions again with the Chicago Bulls. I mean, it's just a fascinating story to talk about some of these people and how they view failure. And they view failure as a gift. Because once you know failure, then you can appreciate success. So that's a little bit about one of the core factors in our book, Stronger. Let me tell you a little bit about our senior author, George Everly. George is one of the founding fathers of modern stress management and a pioneer in the field of human resilience. He's associate professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Hopkins School of Medicine and professor of psychology at Loyola University here in Baltimore. He has consulted with FEMA, U.S. federal marshals, the FBI, and numerous other governmental agencies. Please welcome Dr. George Everly.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. Let me thank Doug for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for attending to talk about or listen to what let us talk about something that's near and dear to our heart. Doug opened with a great question. The greatest gift you can give your kids, resilience. How about the greatest gift you can give yourself? Resilience. And somebody, I didn't notice who, when Doug asked the question, what's the greatest gift you can give your kids? It's you. And I would agree with that. But it's a you that's healthy. It's a you that can serve as a role model in how to handle adversity. And again, as Doug points out very correctly, not only has everyone in this room handled adversity, but our children will face it, our employees will face it, our companies will face it. John Kennedy once said, "A rising tide lifts all boats." I actually look forward to adversity because I know that adversity will take care of much of my competition, which sounds a little crazy. But I know that the people that are simply there riding the tide won't be when the tide drops. The cream comes to the top, and we will stay at the top, but resilience is what we need to know as a person, as a manager, as a leader, as a parent. Many of us here are entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur. I happen to have taken a dark side toward medicine, but that's okay. The entrepreneurial spirit is still alive and well in me. People have asked some of the radio interviewers, how did we get the idea for the book? This is my third resiliency book. My first book was called Resilient Child, won the first book I ever wrote for parents, and it won the gold medal for parenting, book of the year. Doug and I were fortunate enough to write a book together called Resilient Leadership. Soon after that, we were consulting at Goldman Sachs. If you've never heard of them, they're the people that rule the world. Anyway, and the piece of the trifecta that was missing was the individual. And this book would not have happened without Doug and my collaboration, in a way. Doug comes at this from a very, very different point of view than I do. And I found that Doug's view was perhaps insufficient. My view was insufficient. But when we put them together, I think we discovered something really special. For years, I'd been doing research. And that's what you do when you're a university professor. And I had developed statistical models which actually predicted what makes you sick psychologically. And we've been doing this for 20 years. My colleagues and I have been able to identify the single most toxic psychological factor you can have. It predicts acute physical illness, it predicts depression, it predicts burnout, and it even predicts your physical health a year down the road. Pretty powerful stuff. But my whole career had been focusing on sickness. And I thought, as my career is taking another view, another perspective, maybe I ought to look at what makes people healthy or keeps them healthy. So I went to my statistician, a brilliant guy, and I said, what would happen if we took our data on toxicity and adversity and held it up to a mirror? And he'd say, you wouldn't be able to read it. I said, no. I said, no. It's a metaphor. Work with me. What would happen if we held it up to a mirror? What is the opposite? And he said, God bless him, he's a statistician. He said, I don't know, I guess the opposite of sickness. I said, would that be prevention? He said, it could be. So lo and behold, we didn't know it, but for 25 years, we had a model, the most powerful model on the planet, of what keeps people healthy. So I thought, the nice thing about being a full professor is you can do the research that you've always wanted to do, but never could get published. So now it was time for me to do the research I really wanted to do. I wanted to talk to people who were resilient, people that came out of the pages of our model. And I thought, well, who are resilient people that I can find maybe one cohort, a cluster of? And I thought Medal of Honor winners. They were scattered all over the country. Okay, number two, a lot of books and movies had come out about Navy SEALs. So I said, Navy SEALs, they're resilient. Oh my golly. So I went to California and I said, hi, I'm George. I'm a nice guy. Can we talk? And they said, no. I said, why not? They said, we don't trust people like you. I said, people like what? Well, you're not a SEAL. I'm like, oh, no. All right. So I put it on the back burner. But being, as Doug points out, tenacious, I was back in California. A guy picks me up from the airport. All I knew was that he was a retired Navy captain. That's all I knew. The guy picks me up. He looks like he's late 70s. And I said, hey, thanks for picking me up. By the way, I'm a golf addict. Would you mind swinging by La Costa and dropping me off? He says, I'll wait for you. I said, no, sir, really, you don't have to. The way I play golf, this could take a long time. And he said, no, you're my responsibility. Now, I've been under Secret Service protection before, and it's weird. It sounded just like Secret Service. I mean, they follow you into the men's room, the whole bit. And I said, are you Secret Service? He says, no, I'm retired Navy. I said, all right, well, whatever. I said, no, really, how about this? I'll call you when I'm done, but at least let me take you to dinner. La Costa's a nice place. And he said, I got to spend the evening with my wife. I said, bring your wife, please. Wife comes along. 4'11", she walks in the door. French Algerian. Their love story should be a movie. Anyway, we had a wonderful evening. He's driving me back to my hotel. She whispers in his ear. And he says, do you still want to do research in Navy SEALs? I said, well, yeah. But he says, I'll make that happen. And I said, well, how is that? He says, I'm a Navy SEAL. All right. Yes. Better to be lucky than good. So that opened the door for 3 years of research, and ultimately our meeting Dr. McCormick, who is the co-author, and that one of the very first 62 Navy SEALs. Amazing people. So we were able to distill through science, which is a little different than most what we'll call self-help books, and distill into what we thought was a very almost formulaic. Doug and I actually started out in business administration, and we were actually in an accounting program for about a semester, right?
Didn't stay long.
But debits on the left, credits on the right, everything balances out except on Wall Street maybe. But basically it balances out. And then we go into this ethereal world of, I'm okay, you're okay. Are you kidding me? I mean, just can I gag? But we discovered there really was a science and a hard science behind psychology. So I think we've discovered it. We put some of it in the book. I do want to read, sometimes when we go to bookstores, they will actually ask us to read a little bit, and I don't want to bore you, but I do want to capture the essence, and the original words are perhaps the best, because we stopped not just with the Navy SEALs. Some of you may remember the book, The Greatest Generation, Tom Brokaw. He said, "This is the greatest generation that has ever lived. I just returned from London, where I wanted to interview survivors of what was called the London Blitz. I interviewed two World War II veterans, American veterans. One of them was a pilot. In fact, if you go to the Smithsonian, you can see his airplane. He flew off the beaches of Normandy. The survival rate was 20%. He has an airport named after him in United States, has an airport named after him in France. And I interviewed him, and he was most proud, he said, that he never hesitated to dive. He said, I never hesitated to dive on a target, no matter how heavy the flak was. And then I interviewed somebody else from World War II who I thought was very special. But allow me to not bore you, but hopefully read just a portion or two. Those who went before us can teach us a great deal, as philosopher and author George Santayana wrote. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. George S. Everly Sr., whom we profiled in an earlier chapter, was a member of Tom Brokaw's Greatest Generation. A musician for 80 years, he once said, "Old musicians never die. Their song is ended, but their melody lingers on. Extraordinarily resilient people leave a melody that lingers. It's a melody that will teach us much if we're wise enough to listen." So let's listen one last time. Abby Robin Tillery, who was abused, neglected, sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused when she was young, pregnant at age 18, living on a boat that had a leak in it with her small child, said, "Finding a way to imagine a better life for oneself is the first step in making it happen. Telling people to never give up doesn't last if people can't imagine a better life." There's a strong intuitive sense in all of us that screams out against all odds, "I will make it," she said. She became a bikini model, but then she became a doctor. And now she is one of the top 2 or 3 psychiatric consultants in the covert intelligence world. Ben Carson. "What happens with your life is up to you," he says. When asked to summarize his concept of resilience, Carson told us, "When adversity strikes, simply refuse to be a victim." More about George Everly Sr., soldier, husband, father, member of the Greatest Generation. A child of the Great Depression, Everly learned that survival was a team sport. Raised on a farm without running water or electricity, he learned how important it was to play his role and play it well, without asking, "What's in it for me?" That would be nice to hear for once in a while, wouldn't it? After enlisting in the Army, he went to war, during which his early lessons on interdependence were reinforced. He learned that there was no such thing as an army of one. After coming home from war, he sacrificed a career in Hollywood, playing in the movies with the big band of the great era. As he said, it would create an unstable environment with which to raise a family. He later ended a successful career in finance prematurely in order to better care for a spouse who had suffered from a chronic illness. Once at an airport, Everly noted that a man in the food line behind him was wearing an Army uniform. When Everly paid for his food, he asked the cashier to also charge the soldier's food to his credit card. The soldier seemed shocked. When asked why he paid for the soldier's food, Everly said, "A lot of my friends died defending this country in World War II. Soldiers are willing to go to war and die for us now. They don't ask for anything in return. The least we can do is show them a little respect." Patrick Rummerfield. This is an amazing story. Patrick Rummerfield is the world's only fully recovered quadriplegic. Not only is he fully recovered, he ran a marathon and a triathlon. Cal Ripken, you've heard about him. Erica Brannick, you've heard about her. What do they all share? What we were surprised to find when we listed the factors of the Navy SEALs in a column that predicted Sixth SEAL as the most elite warrior in the world, and we compared it to professional athletes, we compared it to World War II veterans and survivors of tragedy. What shocked me, as evidence I'm not the brightest light on the porch, they were all the same. The best news of all, you can learn this stuff. You can learn it at any age. And it is, in many ways, the gift that keeps on giving. But I'll make one last appeal to the business person in you. It may be that the business that survives is the business that is most resilient. We will probably find market volatility and fluctuations. The question is, will your business waver with the markets, or will you see it as an opportunity, a true opportunity? I was a professor in the University of Hong Kong, and one of my students came up after a class and wrote on the board in Mandarin. He said, "Do you read Mandarin, yes?" And I said, "I'm sorry, that's just one I missed on the way up." And he said, well, this is the word crisis, and it was two symbols. He said, "Do you know what they mean?" I said, "No, but I bet you're going to tell me." He said, "The first one means danger. The second means opportunity." And all of a sudden, it became very clear to me. Pessimists see the danger. Optimists see the opportunity. Which one will you be? Thank you for your time.